Now will we see the magic?
All right, where's Murray? Okay, who is it?
This is Jesus, kid.
Know then that it is the year 10,191.
Yes, we are bored. We're all bored now.
Hi, good night.
Good night.
Hello, and welcome to Mary vs. the Movies with your host, Mary Jones.
And Dennis Lang. And, by the way,
What?
those are the shoes.
What?
Those are the shoes.
Oh, God. Okay. I will explain that in a moment. So it is relevant. This week's episode is about the 1986 David Byrne film True Stories, about which I don't actually know anything. And this is ironic because I love Talking Heads.
Yep.
And I think Byrne is a fascinating artist.
We're actually going to go see David Byrne.
Yes.
This fall.
They're bringing American Utopia back to Broadway in the fall. And as we are both fully vaccinated, we are going to spend our 10th anniversary, our 15th wedding anniversary in New York. And part of what we're doing is going to see American Utopia. We got tickets, so we're very excited.
Yeah.
We've watched the...
variant willing.
Well, yeah. The future is obviously unwritten, but fingers crossed, in late October, we will be up in New York City watching American Utopia. We watched the concert film, of course, directed by Spike Lee, and I loved it. I absolutely loved it. And found it very powerful, and I can't wait to go and see it in person. On the same subject, again, I really love Talking Heads. I've always found them a fascinating, wonderful, very unique for American bands. Yeah. And the reason I make that distinction is simply because, obviously, after a certain couple of years, there's a heavy, African influence. So when I say they're unique for American, there are things that they're doing that would not be unique if you were talking about Fela Kuti or somebody, but it's unique for Americans. And obviously they also worked with, artists more identified with prog, Adrian Belew and folks like that. So, yeah. Brian Eno, yeah, obviously, famously. Yeah, I love Talking Heads, but I've never seen True Stories. I've seen Stop Making Sense, which I think is one of the greatest concert films of all time. I argued that it was the greatest concert film of all time, and I got shot down by none other than Tom Sharpling, who still says it should be Rust Never Sleeps. And I think there's an argument to be made for that, but I love Stop Making Sense. I think it's amazing. And we went to see it at the Ambler Theater in Ambler, PA, which is, about 5 miles from us. And we had a bizarre experience. So we're sitting in this theater and we're very excited to watch the film, and the film starts. And if you remember the film, it starts with David Byrne's feet. And it starts with him playing Psycho Killer. Okay. And this person is sitting right behind us, and we hear him say, as we're watching the film begin, "Those are the sneakers." What? And this person was talking, I guess, to the person beside them. He goes, "Those are the sneakers." I'm like, okay.
he described everything that's his amp.
Right, yeah.
This is his pick,
Yeah, exactly. But not only that, so here's the thing. So he's describing everything to the person next to him. And, I kind of just turn around what's going on? Because, as far as I can tell, that the person next to him was not, sight impaired. He's getting very excited. And as the opening progresses, in comes Tina Weymouth. And he says to the person next to him, that's Tina Weymouth. And I'm thinking, yeah, we know. Yeah, we know it is, all right? And the thing is, you have to understand, the opening of the concert film is they're slowly building the band up. And it is a thing about the way that Demi, directed the film. It's really cool. So that, he slowly builds up the band until, you have, all of these musicians on stage. And, eventually it opens up to the entire crowd. But so this guy behind me is going, that's Tina Weymouth. And then, when they bring in Chris Franz, I hear him go behind me. That's Chris Franz. Yeah, man, he's the drummer. What? Okay, fine. So I'm used to this guy now talking behind me. And then the film, Demi directs it so that, on comes Jerry Harrison, who is the second guitar, but also the keyboardist for Talking Heads. And I'm waiting for this guy behind me to say, that's Jerry Harrison. And he never says it. He never says it. And the thing is, you have to understand, Jerry Harrison was in the Modern Lovers. Have some respect. He plays the greatest organ solo on a rock record of all time in Roadrunner. Oh my God, how do you not bring up the fact that that's Jerry Harrison?
I really wish you had turned around and said, that's Jerry Harrison, by the way, and you should have known that. It's very important.
Yeah, well, it is very important, okay? So I really like Talking Heads, okay?
Yeah.
So I've never seen this movie, right?
But why?
Why? Okay, so here's the thing, and I haven't told Dennis this story yet.
No.
I knew that this movie existed, but I didn't entirely know this movie existed. And let me explain. I knew that there was a movie that had music from Talking Heads, and that John Goodman was in it. And I guess, is it the wildlife video?
Yeah.
Yeah, that he's in. Okay.
The wig at the end.
Yeah, and I've seen him in that video. Okay. And I've always liked John Goodman as an actor. When I was a kid when the show Roseanne came on, and I loved the original show Roseanne, because I came from like a working class family, and there weren't a lot of depictions of that on TV. And so when I watched Roseanne, I felt kinship to the family I'm watching, and at the time my father had died, and so here was this actor who is like a big guy who, like my father is a big guy, and you draw connections when you're a child. So I've always liked John Goodman as an actor. But here's the thing. Around the same time, a few years later, because I was not really aware of True Stories or even Talking Heads when this movie would have come out, because it was 86, I would have been 7 years old. I probably had seen, Once in a Lifetime or something on television, but we didn't even have cable when I was a kid, so I don't know what I would have seen. Anyway, where I'm going with this is, I knew that there was a movie that had Talking Heads music, and John Goodman was in. But I also knew that John Goodman was in a very scary movie called Barton Fink.
Oh, I thought you were going to say Arachnophobia.
No, because I've seen Arachnophobia. I saw it when it came out, and I really liked it. But I also had a vague notion that the movie Barton Fink existed and that John Goodman was the devil in it, which is kind of true.
Yeah.
And
close.
yeah, and so here's the thing. I knew that Barton Fink was a movie that would scare me, and that came out like maybe 1990, I think. Yeah. So all of these thoughts are happening sometime in the very early 90s. They're not happening when any of these films actually came out. Okay, so I knew that there was a film that was scary that starred John Goodman. But here's the thing. At the same time that I knew that was out there, and meanwhile, the Coen brothers have now they're one of my favorite filmmakers. I conflated Barton Fink with Eraserhead.
Oh.
Because of John Turturro.
Yeah.
And so if you've seen what John Turturro looks like in Barton Fink, and you've seen still images from Eraserhead, you can see why my brain conflated those two.
And Barton Fink is kind of like the most Lynchian of the Coen brothers stuff.
It absolutely is. Yeah. So here's the thing. My brain at some point decided that True Stories was not directed by David Byrne, but by David Lynch. Yeah. And so I was not in a hurry to see it, because while David Lynch, I think, is a fascinating artist, I got to be psyched up to watch some of his stuff because it's intense. Yeah. It's very intense. And I'm saying this as somebody who, when I was 11, tried watching Twin Peaks, and I got through some of it, but about as much as an 11-year-old's going to get through. So I've never seen this movie because I thought it was directed by David Lynch and had something to do with being very scary.
So you had no idea what this movie
I have no idea what this movie's about. I don't know anything about it. I really don't.
I barely know too, but I'm pretty sure it's not scary.
It's probably not scary at all.
Yeah.
I'm sure it's not scary at all. But I created a whole idea of what this movie is in my head when I was young, and so I've never gotten around to seeing it because eventually I was corrected and it was like, no, David Lynch did not make this movie. This is David Byrne, and that's why it's all talking heads and cool. But like, I just never got around to it. So,
Yeah.
and this is a very long introduction, but I had to explain why I've never seen this movie,
Yeah.
and I had to explain that I love talking heads,
Right.
but this is why. And so, I don't know about you, but I'm kind of excited to see it.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's any good, but I know I'll like the music.
I think it's gonna be weird.
Okay, but is it going to be like Lynchian weird?
I don't think it's gonna be Lynchian weird. I think it's gonna be that weird, like, David Byrne staring at you weird.
Yeah, that's fine. I can dig that. You know, I don't. You know, yeah, that's fine. I can.
I don't mean that as a bad thing. I'm just ready.
Yes, and so am I. Finally, it just took me 35 years.
Yeah.
All right, so let's go watch it.
Like sitting on pins and needles, things fall apart. It's scientific. Sleeping on the interstate. Getting wild, wild, like checking in, checking out. I got 'em wild, wild, spending all of my money.
Wow, what a movie! Yeah,
I characterize
yeah.
it.
What was your reaction to it?
My reaction is that it's Koyaanisqatsi if it was a comedy with a narrator.
That does make a certain sense. Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, Koyaanis. You know what? You say it.
Koyaanisqatsi.
I watched that in college.
Oh, I'm sorry. Koyaanisqatsi.
Exactly. I watched that in college for a class I took in the fall of 1999 about the apocalypse.
Was this in college?
Yeah, this was in college.
Yeah.
And yeah,
Of course you sought it out.
well, yeah, in a heartbeat. It was a great class. It was really cool. It made quite the impression on me. And so yes, I can see how, in fact, I don't know if you know this, if you go and look up on IMDb under connections, because they'll do things where people will connect films to other films and say, oh, they're referencing this, they're referencing that. They do say that Koyaanis, you say it,
Koyaanisqatsi.
influenced this film,
Yeah,
which makes sense.
you could see it.
So,
So before we watched this movie, I quickly said, I bet this movie is like that movie Real People that we just saw, starring Charles Grodin, done by Albert Brooks.
yeah.
And it's not. Like, it has all the trappings of it.
Right.
Like, it has a lot of, because that's kind of like this kind of satire about, kind of about the origins of reality television.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
But this movie is not that at all.
No. Well, they do have kind of a common origin point in that Real People, the Albert Brooks film, and True Stories, they're both fake documentaries.
Right, sort of.
Well, what do you mean?
I just feel like whatever David Byrne is doing, it's somehow different.
Well, no, I understand that, but he is working within kind of a fake documentary genre. I don't know what else you would call it.
Yeah.
I mean, yes, it's an art film, but it's a fake documentary.
Mm-hmm.
And because the idea is, it is the town of Virgil, Texas, is celebrating the sesquicentennial of Texas joining the United States. And so this is supposed to be a documentary about the town and their celebrations of the sesquicentennial. That is used as sort of a framing device for really just an exploration of the United States and for small towns in America.
Oh, what do they call the day? Oh, celebration of the specialness. And he always makes a point of pronouncing it that way.
Yeah.
The specialness.
Yeah. So, I mean, the thing about David Byrne is it's helpful to remember that he is an immigrant. He was born in Scotland, and he immigrated with his parents when he was, young, but old enough to remember the process. And so his relationship to American culture is different than somebody who was born here. And he brings this up in American Utopia, that, you know, he does still see America as an immigrant.
Right.
And so he has this sense of removal. And he brings it forth in the film because he plays the narrator, you know, our guide to the town. And the whole time he has a very alien quality, which to some extent is David Byrne's, you know, public persona. I mean, I don't know what the man himself is like, but this is certainly the vibe he gives off in general.
I forget, is Man Who Fell to Earth, I think that's 70s, right?
Yeah, that's Bowie.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
the same
kinda
idea
same
of
vibe.
an alien observing
Yeah.
Earthlings. Yeah.
Also probably taken from Stranger in a Strange Land.
You know, that's an interesting thing. Like, you could get into what is the origin of the outsider observing this other culture and trying to write about it. Because, you know, as I was watching this movie, but the idea of the person who comes to a place and tries to describe it to everybody back home, like the travelogue, the observer, the anthropologist even.
Yeah.
There's a long American tradition of that going back to, you know, Mark Twain writing Innocents Abroad. But, you know, before Mark Twain, obviously there were other, you could talk about Marco Polo or John Mandeville back in the Middle Ages. You could talk about, was it Ibn Fadlan, who was an Arabic, I don't know if he was Arabic or Persian, but he was a travel writer in the Middle Ages, like I want to say like the 9th or 10th century. And he traveled up to what's now Russia and wrote about Vikings and stuff like that.
You could say Caesar describing the Celts.
Oh God, Caesar talking about the Gauls and the Celts and everything. Like, yes, absolutely. Yeah. Yes, thank you. Oh my God.
Yeah.
What, are you literally looking at our bookshelf right now?
No, I'm looking at you. I'm thinking, why didn't you bring that up first?
Well, because talking about Caesar and the Gauls is like a fish in water. I don't even notice it anymore.
I know.
You know?
This is like how other people talk about, like, you know, soaps or something.
Or sports or something. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. You can talk about the Sixers all you like, and I'm sitting here thinking about, you know, when Caesar was, you know, dealing with the Edui, and never mind. Anyway.
Well, you're in a much better headspace than us Sixers fans.
Yeah, I sure am. But we digress, and thankfully David Byrne is no Caesar here. It's quite the opposite, because he definitely comes across as an outsider in all of this, and yet so on the one hand, the whole point is here's this quirky town. And the quirky town, and we're going to describe the quirky town and all the weird people who live in it, is an old American genre. Like I said, you could go back to the short stories of Mark Twain, and you could talk about like different levels of viciousness, whether you're talking about, you know, Sinclair Lewis's Main Street or The Simpsons, talking about Springfield, or the show Parks and Rec, the weird small town and all the weird, quirky people who live there. And this is another entry in that. But what makes it interesting is that the narrator is also very weird. And so I don't think it has the same sort of condescension that something like somebody who we're supposed to completely identify with the narrator and say, aren't these hicks weird? I don't think that's what you're supposed to take away from this.
I think it's so different from that he almost doesn't seem like a narrator.
Right, exactly. And that's what I like.
And that's why I feel like it has nothing to do with like real people or that kind of thing. It's like not even satirical, because like he's just like, I want to be this weird.
Right.
You know?
Well, but so here's the thing. Here's the thing. It is definitely a satirical film. One of the characters is sort of a town spokesman played by Spalding Gray. And most of the film he's pretty normal, but we get to when we get into the home life and we find out that like his wife, she's in charge of the fashion show at the mall, and like
Which is very weird.
Which is very weird, but his wife has like that big Baptist hair, right? You know what I'm talking about.
Yep.
The big helmet of hair. And like she's very much a tight, like you can tell that like they have a very weird marriage, because like they don't really talk to each other. And see,
But they talk through their kids to each other.
Yeah, right. And so like I literally just listened to a podcast talking about the Quiverful movement. Do you know about that? It's like this weird evangelical offshoot where people, you know, it's like the wives have to be submissive to their husbands and have as many children as possible because they're building an army of God. All right. So like That's an entire subset of American Christianity that I'm extremely uncomfortable with, obviously. The film is definitely playing off their marriage as to like that type of weird, the woman is submissive. Because like he never really addresses her directly. And when he's trying to describe like how great the town is, like it becomes this weird kind of reverie over the dinner. And like there's definitely like this sort of, it's not that it's never satirical, but the type of satire is kind of odd. It's not toothless exactly, but it's never, I don't know. I don't think you're ever supposed to despise people.
Right.
You know, which is sort of hard to pull off. There's an entire scene in a church that I found fascinating. Obviously, Byrne has already been fascinated by American preachers because, you know, think back to Once in a Lifetime, which is inspired by, you know, listening to radio driving through the South and whatnot.
Also, they had Howard Finster.
Howard Finster?
Yeah.
Where?
Oh, he did that one cover.
Oh my God, you're right. Of course, he. Yeah, Howard Finster does the cover to Little Creatures.
Yeah.
Howard Finster, if you don't know, was an American folk artist who is best known for having like the whirligig sculptures and stuff, and you know the Gardens of Paradise or something done in Georgia. Mm-hmm. And if you know him best from either the cover of the Talking Heads album, I want to say it's Little Creatures, or the cover of R.E.M's Reckoning, and there were a couple of, I think, videos filmed at his house, studio, whatever you want to call it.
Oh, it's a house.
Oh, you've been there?
I've been there, yeah.
You've been to Howard Finster's house?
I was, yeah. Anyway.
Damn it, Dennis, you've lived an entire life before I ever met you.
It's not a studio at all. It's a house that he just built all over and just painted all over and everything. It's crazy. My picture was there at one point.
You had a picture at his house?
Yeah.
What do you mean? Explain.
Well, I went there with a girlfriend, and she had a picture of me, and she put it on a wall for.
So yeah, he going back now that I've had this entire, you know, oh, that's right, my husband had this amazing life before he met me, and we've had a great life since then. But yeah. There is an entire section of the film where they go to an evangelical church, and the guy is preaching all of this crazy stuff. And as you're listening, I think he's talking about like the Trilateral Commission. And I don't remember if he brings up the Carlisle Group or any of these things, but there's video going on behind him, and a lot of it is kind of Church of the SubGenius stuff. And if any of you have ever heard the Church of the SubGenius, then you know what I'm talking about. If you don't, it was a satire of American evangelical religion without ever usually referencing Jesus, because it was more about the rhythms and paranoia of American evangelical religion and the John Birch Society, and you know that whole post, you know, Second World War mindset of, you know, there are commies under the bed and our government is infested with them. And it's an outgrowth of Discordianism, which is a satirical religion started by Kerry Thornley and the other guy whose name escapes me at the moment. But the only reason I remember Kerry Thornley, A, his name is memorable, and B, so if you've watched, like, you know, the latest Adam Curtis documentary, there's a whole stuff about him. If you listen to the QAnon Anonymous podcast, they've talked about like Discordianism. And so this Church of SubGenius is like an outgrowth of that. And the only reason I'm bringing this up is it's really fascinating watching the film, because so this guy is like ranting and raving about essentially conspiracies that are, you know, sub rosa in American culture. And all the stuff he's talking about sounds like QAnon, because it comes from the same well. And so it was very weird watching this movie made 35 years ago. And what these people are ranting about in conspiracies in some fictional church in Texas sounds just like the type of stuff that you would hear Alex Jones, who's based in Texas, ranting about. you can draw a line from like the dumb stuff this guy is saying to people trying to overthrow the government on January 6th. This country has had a very weird sickness for a very long time.
Yeah, I'm sure it's way, way, way older than this.
Oh, it is. It is. It's actually very complicated. In fact, you can kind of trace back parts of this to like the French Revolution and people blaming that on a mixture of Jesuits and the Enlightenment, and specifically an Enlightenment brotherhood called the Illuminati. And, you know, I'm not going to get into it, but yeah, it's very complicated. But to watch this movie, which again, I didn't really know anything about going in, and then just being kind of blindsided by stuff that is still relevant in ways that are kind of frustrating and scary. I mean, I laughed, but it was very strange.
What another strange thing about this? Now we're now almost 35 minutes in.
Yeah.
Well, it'll be edited by this time.
Yeah.
We haven't mentioned what appears to be the main character of this movie.
Right. I know.
And this main character isn't even in this scene at all. I don't
No.
think.
No.
And that would be John Goodman.
Yes.
What's his name? Louis Fine.
Louis Fine. Yes. Yeah.
He works at this computer chip plant.
Right. The main industry in the town is a computer chip corporation. When the film starts, it begins with a history of Texas. And the history is interesting because it goes all the way back to like the
dinosaurs.
Yeah, it goes back to dinosaurs, and it talks about dinosaurs, which gave us oil, and then it talks about humans coming into North America, and then it talks about the different native tribes who live there, and then it talks about Mexico, and then finally it gets to white people showing up, and so it gets into this whole long history of Texas. I mean, when I say long, it's not. Texas has a long history if you actually get beyond the sesquicentennial. And what's interesting about watching that is it's very smart because obviously Byrne's whole point is that the history of Texas goes back, millions and millions of years ago, billions of years ago. And it does not start in 1836. So when you're celebrating a sesquicentennial, it's sort of silly to start there because you're discounting the history of people who are still living there. He has a point for starting it that way, but part of the idea is that the main industry in this town is computer chips, which makes sense, again, because as he brings up in this little short intro, Texas Instruments, which if you're of a certain age, because of calculators that you had to use in class. Or in my case, I actually had a Texas Instruments computer. This was the first computer I had growing up. The corporation that everybody in this town kind of works for it's not Texas Instruments, but it's kind of Texas Instruments. So Louis Fine, played by John Goodman, he works in like a clean room. So that means he has to wear like the jumpsuit and everything. And his whole character is about, this is a man who is desperate to be married. He's desperate to be in love. He has a very sad and desperate vibe through most of the film. But because it's John Goodman, and I'm always kind of sympathetic to his characters, you want him to find somebody. Yeah. And we follow, like, half of the film is actually just following John Goodman around as he tries to find love in this small town.
Now, I have to admit, I'd seen John Goodman in the video.
Yeah. Oh, right. Because, there, in the film, there are two set pieces that are basically just Talking Heads videos. Yeah. There is a scene at a lip sync bar, which is, think like a karaoke bar, but you have to lip sync instead. Yeah. And that is literally, it's just the video for Wild Wild Life. Right. Right. And he is in that video because he is at the lip sync bar. It's interesting because, like, it's a film where the acting is always a bit arch.
It's a little bit like Wes Anderson.
Well, yeah, that's the thing.
Nowadays.
Like, yeah, as I was watching this, I mean, I think I joked once or twice. It was, like, it reminded me a lot of what Wes Anderson would later do. Yeah. And so everything has that kind of slightly artificial quality. But what's interesting to me is Goodman. You can see why they've built some of the movie around him, because it's not that he's the only actor in it. There are other people in here who are actors, but he brings a charisma to a sad sack character that I don't know. I think would be hard to pull off with somebody else.
Yeah.
You know.
And he's a bear. Rawr!
Yeah, he has a line, and as he's trying to like, he basically makes one of those like dating video profiles, but puts it on television, and he has a whole line about how I'm 6'3" and consistently shaped like a panda bear.
Yeah. But he also like frequently will just suddenly do this bear thing and growl.
Yeah.
Just out of nowhere. Like it seems like this kind of acting thing for him where he's like, this is how I get into character. Rawr.
But also, you know, at different points, people refer to him as a bear. And the woman that he eventually marries calls him a bear.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, it's definitely affectionate, though. I love John Goodman in this.
There's a surprising cameo as the voodoo preacher.
Oh, my gosh. Okay, so, yeah, the film is built around several different characters. There's a woman called the Lying Lady. There is a woman called the Lazy Woman, who is a rich woman who just stays in bed all day and watches TV because she's rich enough that she can do that.
She has a robot.
Yeah, she has a robot.
That also has a TV on.
Yeah. But what's really interesting is there is also a character who is basically the local voodoo priest. We do get to go into his house and we see he has like all the altars set up, and it's played by Pop Staples of the Staples Singers, which just blew my mind. Like I was not expecting it to be him. And like it's kind of neat because he does sort of like float around in different places throughout the film. You know, one place he's often over at the rich lazy woman's house. I call her the lazy woman because that's the name of her character. At one point, Lewis goes to him to, you know, have spells done for him to find love. It's really interesting. Like he does get one song in the film, Papa Legba, which you know, as far as I know, was written for the film. And Papa Legba is one of the deities in voodoo. It's kind of funny. Just, you know, this is Pop Staples. This is, you know, the Staples Singers. He is very important for like gospel music in the 20th century, and not just gospel but soul music. And you know, we just saw him in Summer of Soul, the great documentary that if you have not seen it, please go see it. Yep. It's on Hulu. It might still be in theaters. It is fantastic. And you'll see Pop Staples in that, and you will see him in True Stories as the local voodoo priest, and he is a fun character in this.
There's a couple like sort of non-actors in this movie.
Yeah, oh definitely.
Like Ramon, the Tejano singer, he's Tito La Riva. And apparently he was in a punk band, I think called the Plugs or something.
Okay.
An LA punk band.
Yeah.
Yeah, it kind of like a Wes Anderson film. It just feels like there are people.
Yeah, you know, I really want to know if Wes Anderson saw this movie and if it influenced him at all, because it kind of has the feel, because of his use of non-actors in some roles, the sort of artificiality, the Texas setting. You know, his first couple of films are all set in Texas because that's where Wes Anderson grew up.
Also, just the shots are most of the shots are just kind of straight on, perpendicular to everything. Yeah, you know, like a typical Wes Anderson shot.
Yeah, that's true. A lot of the way that the film is shot does sort of remind you of Wes Anderson, the way that he stages everything. And the other thing that I found really interesting about this film is that Byrne very consciously makes sure that we see that this town is multi-ethnic.
Oh, yeah.
Which makes a lot of sense. A lot of times when Hollywood makes a film about a small town in the United States, they often make it very white. And here's the thing. That might be true in certain parts of the country. For instance, I grew up in rural Pennsylvania, and it was very white there. So much so that when the Klan marched through my town, it was against Catholics. So, you know, it depends on what you're talking about. When you're talking about Texas, like, Texas is not white. Right. Like, you know, there are a lot of people in Texas who are Mexican ancestry. They are black. They're, and I'm just talking about people who've been there for hundreds of years. I'm sure there's a lot of people there now who are Asian or whatever. Native American. What Burns, intentionally does is he shows people in this town who aren't white. And that's not just because of, like, say, the character played by Pop Staples or Ramon, right, who you just brought up, who is Latino. When they show the parade toward the end of the film where they're celebrating the town, there is a black drum line. There is a Mexican-American guy in a lowrider. It is a consciously multi-ethnic town as is being presented to us. And
it's not, like, presented as, like, weird or anything. It's just
this is just the people. Yeah, exactly. This is just the people who live in the town. Yeah. And I it's one of those things that you can't trust a film made 35 years ago to have done.
Right.
And he intentionally did that. And it makes a lot of sense because this is what a town in Texas would actually be like.
Was there any black people in Mystic Pizza?
No.
I don't think there was any at all.
No. And which is incorrect because there are black people who live in Connecticut. Now
I'm sure there's any Irish people.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, exactly.
You thought this would be a David Lynch film,
right?
Or maybe a Coen Brothers film.
Yeah. And it's entirely based on, misperceptions and, or kind of not entirely having seen Raising Arizona at the time when I was aware this film existed.
But it definitely looks like either.
Well, that's the thing. Yeah, that's what's interesting. Like, even though the vibe of this film is far sunnier than a David Lynch film, and it's not as maybe biting as the Coen Brothers sometimes are. Although this is closer to a Coen Brothers film.
Yeah. But I feel like I think the tone is closer to Coen Brothers.
Oh, yeah.
Film. But I feel like visually, if you took out the narrator and slowed it down by half, like it's a Lynch film. It just is a Lynch film.
Yeah.
like especially the fashion show?
Oh yeah, the fashion show is very weird.
Yeah, it's extremely weird, and it doesn't explain at all. It's very much like a Lynch thing where it's like, yes, this is some very strange fashions, and that's it.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I do think that Byrne does seem to be influenced by that kind of surrealist. Like, it's definitely, I think it's not wrong to say that Byrne is influenced by surrealists. And David Lynch is sort of the last of the real surrealists. Does that make sense?
Yeah. But I also feel like both of them are more influenced by visual artists like, outside of film rather than film.
Oh, I think that's absolutely true.
Like I think they're more like their influences are just not cinematic.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's true. Well, I mean, Lynch went to what? Philadelphia Fine Arts.
Yeah, I guess it was. I don't know if it was PCA. I guess Philadelphia College of Art at the time, and now I think it's a university now. I don't know.
I don't know. It's the place on Broad Street, right?
Yeah, that one.
Yeah, the big art school on Broad Street in Philadelphia. David Lynch went there. He started out as a visual artist, I guess.
Yeah.
And I mean, I know David Byrne went to art school. I mean, that's how Talking Heads started. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I think they both come out of more like, I'm sure they're both influenced by like Man Ray and guys like that.
Yeah. And also like Laurie Anderson.
Sure.
And,
yeah.
This feels very Laurie Anderson.
Oh, definitely.
She's an alien in the exact same way.
Yes. Yeah.
And eventually we'll see Home of the Brave.
What's that?
It's a concert film that Laurie Anderson did in like 85, I think.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Her William S. Burroughs was involved. So.
Oh, that feels right.
Yep.
So yeah, the film doesn't have like a narrative per se, other than following Lewis around, and he does eventually get married. He marries the the lazy woman who sees him on television singing at what's essentially like the talent show, like their celebration of the history of the town.
And that cube that he sings in, that could easily be like a David Lynch thing.
Yeah.
Just this big green cube with like a red curtain in the middle of like a field.
Yeah.
And like seats and just there's like a bunch of seats in front of it, and then that's it.
Yeah. Obviously, the point of the film is this is David Byrne's idea of America, I think, or at least his idea of America in the 80s. And, it's interesting because you could make a very cynical film, and I don't think he does.
No.
I don't think it's a cynical film. I think he sincerely likes the characters in this movie. And even though they're weird, and even though there are things about them that I think a regular person would look at askance, especially the weird evangelical church, I think he just embraces their weirdness. So that was True Stories, written and directed by David Byrne, with music from Talking Heads, starring John Goodman, Spalding Gray, Swoozie Kurtz, Pop Staples. Contact us on social media. We are Mary VS Movies on Twitter. We are maryvsmovies@gmail.com. If you want to comment, questions, suggestions, complaints, let us know. Next week,
We are foregoing the coin.
we are foregoing the coin. Indeed. Yeah, coin has been thrown out because essentially I looked at like, oh my gosh, it's going to be September and then it's going to be October and I could do theme months. So I've come up with a calendar. But before the calendar hits, I decided, we just saw The Green Knight.
Yeah.
And loved it. And found out that there is a version of Sir Gawain and the Green Knight made in the 80s called Sword of the Valiant. It doesn't look good. But darn it, it's free on Pluto. So we're going to watch it. So our next episode... Because we just watched a truly amazing movie, The Green Knight, we're going to watch a terrible movie.
No, we don't know it's terrible.
Yeah, I don't know, man.
It says 30% on Rotten Tomatoes.
That's not a good average.
But I've never heard of it. Maybe it's not as bad. I don't know.
Well,
like maybe it's closer to The Apple than it is to Metal Storm.
No.
I'm pretty sure it will exceed our expectations, whatever they are. They seem pretty low.
Yeah, rock bottom.
But it does star Sean Connery.
It stars Sean Connery as the Green Knight himself. Until next time.
I'm a bear. Woo!